Soak the flat reed in water for about 30 minutes. Don't soak it much longer, as it will cause discoloration of the material. The first thing you need to do is measure the back between the legs. We have 10 3/4 inches, and measure the front and subtract the two, and you'll come up with a number, and divide that in two, and then measure in from each side and put a pencil mark there. So I've already put a pencil mark right there. It's hard to see with this color wood, and my other mark is there. So that distance will be exactly equal to the back. We're going to wrap the seat first, and you want to use the longest strands out of the coil for that. The material has a smooth side, which you can tell by bending it slightly. It's very smooth. If you turn it over and bend the other side, you can see that that would be not as smooth. So you don't want that side up when you weave. You always want the smooth side up. The first thing we want to do is attach your first piece of reed to the back rail. Some people will use a staple, some people will use a tack, some people have even used masking tape to hold it. I prefer to use a clamp to hold it in position until later on I remove the clamp and that piece is woven into the entire seat. You want to go under the first rail and then over the top and then over the back rail. And I'm going to go ahead and run this piece all the way until there's none left, and then I'll go back and position it and tighten it up. Now I'm going to start this one right on my pencil mark, which is kind of hard to see, but it's there. I'll put the edge right on that line, and then I'm going to go to the back, and I'm tightening it up, but I'm not pulling it real tight. You need to have a little bit of play in there so that you can do your weaving. But you do want them close together, as close as you can get them. And I'll go ahead and tighten this whole strand up. Now I'll use another clamp to hold it right there. And that's actually a perfect length that I wanted to end. If it had been longer, I would have cut it off right about there. Now we are ready to add a new piece. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to make sure my good side is going to be right there, my smooth side. I'm going to overlap it underneath, and I'm going to staple it twice. And those are just temporary staples. After I staple it, I'm going to squeeze this end with the pliers to smooth them down, which prevents catching on it later on when we're weaving. That's a very important step. You'll be glad you did that. Now I'm going to take the new piece of cane and wrap it around loosely, just like I did previously. You can see I use the longest ones I can for this step. It just makes it go faster and makes it a continuous piece. After doing that, I'm going to go back, position that, remove this clamp, and I'll go ahead and finish adjusting this piece and putting it in place. I'll put my clamp here to hold it. And this piece I'm going to cut off because it's a little bit too long. I like them to be about that distance right there. Alright, I've continued adding pieces and weaving, and this will be my last piece because it's going to take me up to my pencil mark. So I'm going to tighten this one up, and that one right there gets me pretty close to my pencil mark, so I'm going to stop right there. It actually works out quite perfectly in the back there, so I'm going to end that there, and I'm going to come over one more time, and I'm going to clamp it to the top rail right there. The excess I'm going to cut off. Now I'm going to move the clamps from their temporary position to the end of the strand so that it's loose. It's tight here, but it's loose there. I'm going to do the same with this one. That's going to allow me to pick these two tails up and weave them into the seat, and that will tighten them up. We're going to do the herringbone weave 3 over 3 under. There's other patterns that you can weave as you advance, but for today we're going to do under 3 over 3. I always start out, I go under the first one in the back left hand corner, and then over 3, and then under 3, over 3, under 3, over 3, under 3. And we're going to go under that last one, which it doesn't tighten up yet, but it will later, and we may end up trimming it off also at that point. I'm going to pull it through until there's just enough there to wrap underneath. And then I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to take that underneath one, and I'm going to do the same over 3, under 3, under here. I'm going to push that one back as far as it will go. And then this side is going to come across the other way in the same pattern. And it's not so critical what it looks like on the bottom. If you make a mistake, no one's going to really see it. I'm going to push that up tight against there, and then I'm ready to flip it over and weave again on the top side. Now this is going to, the first one went under 1, the second one will go under 2, and then over 3. Same pattern, over 3, under 3, over 3. And at this point we've caught hold of this one, but we don't want that sticking out, so I'm going to just slide it underneath, and it'll be hidden. And as we weave later on, it'll tighten it up. So I pull it tight, make sure it's pushed together, and I'm going to flip it over and continue on the bottom. On the bottom, I just pretty much use a basket weave weaving. And we'll go back to the top. The third one will go under 3. We went under 1, under 2, now I'm going to go under 3. Over 3, under 3, over 3. Keep it pushed up, keep the edges together. You can see our herringbone pattern is starting to take shape. Now on the bottom, I'm going to reverse the pattern that I was doing there, just so it tightens up and helps to hold everything together. And at this point I'm catching the loose one. This is the loose strand. And we're going to go back to the top. To continue our pattern, we now have to go over 1 and under 3. And you can see it continues our herringbone pattern. We're going to add a piece now. This one ended right here. You always want to add your new piece on the bottom so that it isn't visible from the top. I'm going to cut this off because it's too long. And then to add my new piece, I'm going to weave it right in on top of that piece, all the way across. I'm going to make sure the bottom one stayed tight. I can't pull too hard on the top one yet, or I will pull it out. But once we get it wrapped around once, then we can. We'll go back to the top now. We're going to continue our pattern by going over 2 and under 3. Now I can pull that tight and the bottom one will stay in position. As you go, you may have to make little adjustments to keep your pattern looking nice. The bottom one sometimes will go quite quickly because you're not doing any kind of fancy weaving on the bottom. You can see that one is now tight from when we added it the previous step. Now on the top, this will be the end of our 6 pattern. We're going to go over 3 and under 3. And then down here, because I've gone 3, I'm going to change to going over and under the other direction to keep everything tight down here. Sometimes a wooden wedge will help you push the strands. You want to kind of keep them as tight as you can down here, or you'll run into a room problem at the end. And even if some of them overlap, it's not that critical here. Okay, now we're going to repeat our pattern from the very beginning. We went under 3, we went over 3, now we're going to start over going under 1. Now you can see our herringbone pattern is very visible. We've gone under 1, under 2, under 3, and then over 1, 2, 3, and we've repeated. And now we're going to go under 2 and under 3. We're just going to repeat that pattern, and I'll keep weaving until we get further along, and then we'll pick up our instructions. At this point, we're able to remove this clamp because this has been tied in through there and there, and as we add more, it'll tie it in tighter, and that'll stay put. You can see we've continued to weave the chair following the same pattern repeatedly. I recommend that you do an entire chair in one sitting because all the strands are wet and loose, and once they dry they shrink and tighten up, and it makes it harder to weave. The chair may actually start drying out on you while you're weaving, so I keep a spray bottle handy and I will just keep moistening it, and you can see I'm very liberal with the water, and that will help to keep it moist as you go. Now we're nearing the end, and I thought I would show you that it's very hard to get the material to go where you want it. So I use just a standard table knife, and you can use that as your guide to push down, and then it slides right over the top. And then just reverse it for your next one. And it really makes a world of difference using a tool like this. It doesn't have to be a knife, but the knife works good for me. And the material is getting very, very tight in there as you near the end. So it's nice to have a tool to help you. Now this strand is going to need the same assistance on the bottom because it's just getting very, very tight here and there's not much room. And we're also going to add another strand here, and we'll show you that step again. I'm going to just cut that off there. This new strand is going to go right on top of that one. Generally it will slide in quite easily. You'll have to manipulate it a little bit to get it to go where you want. Just going about that far. It's not going to ever come out. Then we'll go back to the top, and this should be our last piece going across here. So continuing our pattern, we went over 1, over 2, so this is going to go over 3. And it's going to be pretty tight because there's not much room between these and the front rail. But with the use of our tool, we should be able to be all right. And I'm going to use my wooden wedge to just push it up, just to keep it all fairly tight there. And the last one on the bottom sometimes is pretty much of a challenge to get in because you've got so many strands there. It kind of went under there, but I'll live with that. And that's our final strand, so I'm going to cut it off right here. Now we're ready to fill in the front where we didn't have any. It's drying out a little bit, so I'm going to squirt this side where I'm working. First we'll do this side, and then we'll get to that side. You can use short pieces here. They don't need to be long. And you want to weave continuing the same pattern that these ones were following. So this one went under 1, this one went under 2, this one went under 3. So this one is going to have to go over 1 and then under 3. And we're just going to go over 3 and under 3. And we'll probably need our knife to help us as it gets tighter. And we'll just go back as far as we can. And it looks like that's probably it right there. So I'm just going to run some extra underneath there, and it's just going to be laying underneath there. We don't want to come out 3 more and then just have our piece standing up in the air, so we're going to end right there. Now I can put 3 pieces in there because I have room for 3. So we'll put our next one in, and that would go over 2 and under 3. And then over 3 and under 3, and it's going to end right about there because there's not enough room to bring it out anymore. And then our third one is going to go over 3, and that's probably about it. So I'm just going to run some extra, and it's underneath there a ways, and that'll hold. Now we're going to flip it over and tie in the bottom of those same 3 strands. This one's kind of long, so I'm going to get rid of some excess. So we take our first strand, and because there's 3 there, I'm going to start and go under 3. It'll be a little bit of a struggle, but it'll help tighten everything up. So I'm going to go under 3, over 3. It can be a little bit of a struggle, but if you work with it, you can eventually get it. Now I'm going to cut it off. I don't need this much. I'm going to go underneath there and just leave the rest tucked under. So I'm just leaving it long so it's got room to stay in there. Now sometimes it's helpful if you take a pair of needle nose pliers and grab it and just pull. It pushes it underneath there and it tightens everything up behind you here. And you can use your wood tool to make everything as tight as possible. And then you want to grab the next one and do the same thing. This one should be a little easier because you've already established the pattern with that first one. The first one was quite a struggle to get in. Again, I'm going to use the tool to kind of help me push it. It's really tight, and you kind of want it to be because it locks everything together. Once again, I'm going to cut off the excess. And I'm just going to go on top of this one. And then I'm going to try and make sure it's as tight as possible. And then we have our last one. They actually get easier as it goes because they're following the path that the first one's made. This one is nice and tight, and because it's so tight I'm going to cut it off right here, and that will hold. So we now have that side done, top and bottom. I'll do the other side off camera. I'm going to show you what we would do to trim the bottom up a little bit. We have one tail here that's kind of going to hang down, so I'm just going to trim that off just to look better. It's still going to be held in because it's woven in. We have a couple staples that are still visible. A lot of the staples have been covered, but here's one that's visible. It's not important that you remove this staple, but you can, and everything is going to stay put. So if you want to go in and remove some of the staples that are visible, you can just pull them real hard and they come right out. Here we have the completed chair. I have filled in this other corner. I've trimmed the bottom up a little bit to make it look better. And congratulations, your project is done.